Good morning again. So you did not get enough of me earlier. So I guess they called me back onto the stage. But thank you so much for joining, Lokesh. I want to take the conversation from where I began, from what I was talking in the morning, that sustainability is a culture, and if it needs to remain a culture or become a culture, it has to begin from the top. But it's important to understand that do CEOs or the business leaders who are not under the pressure of compliance for sustainability think about sustainability? So my first question to you is to understand, what is it that sustainability means to you?
Okay, so before I answer, I'll preface it by saying I will not pretend to be a master or an expert at sustainability. However, over the last 15 odd years, in various kinds of roles, I have learned that this is as important as driving growth or all the other stuff that you do on the business side. So the first thing that comes to mind, Harbinder, is I think responsibility. And I think it comes by practice. So if you remember, I think we are the same generation. You spoke about how we have seen the change. Growing up, when you had a thumbs up or a Campa Cola, or what kind of straw did you have?
The plastic.
No, even before that was the thin paper ones.
Thin paper ones.
Which was lose their structure in 5 seconds, right? And now you're back to what? You're back to paper. And we have seen that kind of change. So I think, even if you go back 15 years, when I was in a company that had 20,000 people and I was responsible for them, let's say, it's whatever that responsibility was. But at that time, I remember very clearly, we started talking about, let's not use plastic in the conference rooms. Let's have, glass, water bottles, etc., etc. So I think a lot of people did not take that seriously. So what change is that going to make? But I think with time, that has kind of become the norm. And I think it's the same with sustainability. It's a huge topic. But I think till we practice it over and over again, it does not stay at top of mind because you are always worried about growth and revenue and numbers, etc. So you need either internal or external pressure sometimes to think about it and keep it top of mind. So yes, it is important and it has to be driven from the top, but sometimes it is not top of mind.
So, what do you think will bring it to the top of the mind? And when I'm talking to you about this, what comes to my mind is that it's okay to think about sustainability when we're talking about large organizations. But we have a huge population of business owners in our country. And for them, they're struggling to meet their costs, right? And for them, the priority is low cost and something which is, what would you call it, be convenient. How do you drive a message to that business owner and to start thinking of it despite sustainability being perceived as something which is a little more expensive than doing what is convenient?
I would submit that the small business owners are actually less wasteful for exactly this reason. Because they are very mindful of what they need to do to do well. So if you look at just the wastage that a small business creates, somebody who's a single person owner of a small business, I think that wastage is going to be much lesser than a large company. So I don't really think it is about driving change necessarily in the small business community or large business community. I think it's about how do you make it an everyday affair for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that, I believe very strongly that comes only through practice. You tend to forget it, and therefore you need both the internal and external pressures to help you through that thought process. And sometimes, like you mentioned in the morning, it's the compliance laws and regulations that force you to think. For example, right now, our company is a medical devices company. So and it's a very small company in India, right? So from a 20,000 people services company, it's now a 60 people hardware company. The pressures are completely different. Now it's about electronic waste management, right? Because that's what your product produces. So how do you even think about that? And the way we started thinking about it is when the government came up with this electronic and plastic waste, regulation laws. That's what forced us to think about, okay, we are actually generating waste. We were not thinking like that. But, sorry, going back to that question of small, I believe they are less wasteful. It's the bigger guys who need to think more.
So, when we're talking about the bigger guys, again, like I mentioned, that it is a culture and the culture is driven from the top. What do you think you, as a chief executive officer of the organization, would do to create this culture in your organization? Do you have somebody who's working on sustainability?
Very honestly, till a month ago, no. But now that we started working on this initiative of making sure that we comply, now we have somebody who's looking at it. So now we have people who are from our operations team, from our legal team, from our regulatory affairs team. But is this something that I believe will be sustained in the long term just because we are required to comply? No, I believe we'll have to have sustainability as an agenda item when we do our, let's say, our quarterly review, etc. So, yeah, we talk about growth, we talk about numbers, we talk about people, but are we also talking about initiatives that we have taken? And that could be, I believe that could be in various forms, could be directly by our company or our people, could also be partnering with companies who have sustainability as, it could be, for example, a CSR initiative, where both people and monies are spent or participate with somebody who runs these kinds of initiatives. Sometimes it is not possible to be directly invested because it depends on, like you said, 1%, 10%, 15% company, maybe they don't have the resources to do it directly. But can you partner, can you give back in some other way? I believe we will initially go that route before creating something internally. I think that will come with scale.
Got it. I don't want this to be a boring session. And the whole idea of having this conference is to engage each one of us. So before I go to the next question, I want to open it to the house to understand if you have a question for Lokesh that you would want to ask. From a CEO whose mindset is changing from not having thought of sustainability to now, month ago, hire a person who's going to be responsible for driving sustainability in an organization. So any questions that you may have for Lokesh? No questions, okay. So, Lokesh, what I really want to ask about is that sometimes we take that initiative. We want to bring that change and we do take that first step. But then there are two things that happen. One is there are speed bumps that we encounter, and then we start feeling that it's tough to do that, it's tough to remain, and I'm getting distracted from the core of my business. And second is most of the time, the responsibility of a business leader is to drive the business and profits, because whatever we do has to give you some kind of an ROI. So when you look at sustainability, what is the kind of ROI or the measure that you look at it from your perspective? And how do you make the effort of sustainability itself sustainable?
So I think it has to come through the value system of the company. And like you said earlier, values, culture, etc. has to be driven from the top. So not everything that you put as part of your value system can be objectively measured sometimes. And I think this, to start off with, this could be one of those things that you're not able to measure the impact. But I think going forward, as your initiatives become more and more streamlined and measurable, then those values can come back. So I'll give you an example. In the previous company, for example, there are hundreds and hundreds of cabs that used to take employees to bring them to office and take them back home. Now, a small shift started happening, right? We started getting electric vehicles to do all of this stuff. After doing this for 6-7 months, you really started seeing the impact of what this would mean overall. So I think measurability comes over time. So initially you might not even know how to measure it, but slowly but steadily you get to that point where you can measure. But I think we should not start off by saying that we must measure on day one. It is like values, ethics. What are you measuring?
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. In fact, before I close the session, I want to ask each one of you a question. How many of us sitting here use services like Uber, Ola? So most of us sitting in the room have used these services. We now have electric cars and cabs that have come in. And sometimes when we try and book, they're a little more expensive than Uber and Ola. How many of us choose to pay for an expensive ride because it is sustainable? Just a handful of you, To me, that is a mindset change that we need to bring in. And this mindset change is important because, as Mr. Vishwanath just spoke, that we must understand that we have not inherited the planet from our ancestors. We've borrowed it from our children. And if you look at it, that brings in the responsibility to create an environment where you would want your sons and daughters to live happily and safer, healthy. That's the point I'm trying to make. And that's what I think every business leader in any organization, small, big, individual enterprise, needs to bring in that consciousness that what am I doing to making this planet a happy place to live. With that, I want to thank you, Lokesh, for your time and taking on, being a CEO to come onto the stage and talk about, how we were not taking the initiative to what we are doing now takes a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.